Today at Above the Tree Line, I have Kim Lacasis from Cadence.
Great, thanks. Appreciate it.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about Cadence?
Look, we're a customer communications advisory and managed service. We help organisations in banking and insurance and superannuation, or pensions, as you might call it in the US, and some government sectors wise their essential communication ecosystem, or their mandated comms, you might call it. And that's not just the technology play. It's everything from customer experience and content best practice through to brand, compliance, technology, etc. And to answer your question about why we started it, look, we just saw a need in the market for an independent voice that wasn't necessarily connected to a big bureau, print and mail provider, or a large corporate, or one of the software providers that could give these customers really independent advice about what we think is best for them. So that's really why we kicked it off.
Yeah. Now, your background is both you and your partner, Dave, you have been in the industry for quite a while, right? Previously with Computershare, and I think both in global roles. For those people that don't know Computershare, I believe it's based in Sydney?
Yes, based in the head office in Melbourne, but based in Australia. But look, really, it's a global business now, big financial services firm. And the piece that we were in was the communication services business with operations all around the world.
So, Kim, what's your view of the market there in Australia, I guess, first of all, but then how are you seeing maybe the Asia Pacific and then maybe more globally? And then I think eventually we're going to get down to talking about the United States and what's going on here. But just what's your take on things right now?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting time, Andy. I think with the advent of AI in comms, everyone's talking about it, and we're very much talking about it with our customers too. But I think there's some basics to get right before you get into that area. Certainly the market in Australia, or certainly Asia Pac, is trending towards insourcing composition. Customers like those banks and insurers and people I talked about earlier, purchasing their own software, and if you like, taking control of their comms. We're seeing a lot of people say, look, I'm a bit sick of not knowing what's going out when and how, and not having the control of the IP around some of this stuff. So that's a big trend that's happening in this part of the world, and I believe more broadly elsewhere as well. The challenge, though, as I said earlier, for these people is, so how do I make all of that happen? I probably don't have the resources or the skill sets internally. Do I really want to go through a huge process, or maybe should I just get some people in who understand this stuff and help make it happen? And I think that's why back to the point before, that's why we've set up the business. That's why Cadence Communications exists, really, is to help people with that. So the trend for us is insourcing. Obviously, there are really big trends globally in reduction in print and mail volumes, which is no surprise to anybody who's been in the game for a while.
Yep.
Driven a lot by cost, if we're honest about things. Postage costs are through the roof everywhere, and as volumes decline, that only gets harder for postal services around the world. And I think that, and probably the increase in digital adoption, even with some of the older generations, drives more digital adoption, which it all feeds into these reductions in the traditional channels. So as things become more digital, it's much more attractive for people to, or when I say people, customers, banks and insurers, to invest in some of their own technologies and get better control of things.
Yeah. Wow. So from a digital adoption perspective, where are you seeing, obviously this varies by vertical, right? By communication type, you can slice and dice this thing a zillion different ways, but in terms of digital adoption on a global basis, or I should say on a local basis in Australia, what are you seeing in terms of adoption? Let's call it the bank financial services vertical.
It's interesting because Australian consumers particularly, if I just talk about that for a minute, are very tech savvy. We're pretty early adopters of technology more broadly, certainly in Oceania, and it varies a little bit around the broader Asia Pacific, but pretty early adopters of technology, I guess, in general. But there are other things driving the uptake of the digital side of things. And one of the big ones here and also around the world is government regulation, certainly in the mandated comms space. In the marketing space, people can do a lot more whatever they want because it's not regulated by government bodies. But where we tend to play is in the mandated comms space. And so a lot of the uptake is driven in regions, I think, by also what the government's doing and how willing they are to update laws and change laws to allow a more digital first sort of approach. So in Australia, that's happened quite a bit over the last few years. And so we've got a lot more what used to be traditionally print, now going digitally.
And is that being driven? I'm just curious about, frankly, the politics behind that. Is it being driven from an environmental perspective, or what's the driving factor that's pushing the regulators, the lawmakers to say, we should do more digital?
Yeah, no, good question. I think it comes from a few areas. I think firstly, the consumer is saying, look, I don't want all of this paper environmentally. I don't need a huge PDS document, or I can just read it online. Why do I need all this stuff?
And you just know there's a bunch of people out there booing and hissing as they hear you say that.
No, I know that. And look, I'm from that world, so I get it, right? I do get it. But I think we've got to be real. This stuff is happening. And if we've all got to accept certain realities in life, and this is one of them, right, is that eventually all of this stuff will definitely be digital. And once governments free up the rules, what you'll do is you'll get a note on your app saying, or a communication electronically saying, go here and have a look at your documents. Frankly, that's happening in the UK. That's already happening in a big way. I think I'm all for having multiple channels available to consumers, and I'm all for print where print's needed, but I think we've just got to be real. I suppose the other thing I would say to you is, apart from the environmental concerns, just the cost. Businesses are going to government, certainly in this part of the world, and saying, look, this is costing us dollars per pack. If I do it digitally, it's gonna cost me a lot less, and I can invest that money elsewhere. There is that element of it as well. It's also a speed to market thing. If you think about it, right, if you've got a good setup, you could actually communicate with someone digitally instantaneously, virtually. Whereas doing some of the traditional print and mail channels, it takes days and weeks to get stuff done. And so the government here has seen that, and that's, I think, also helped free up things a little bit.
Yeah, it's real interesting. And I know we're going to come back and talk, I think, specifically more about the US market, but I think it's the same thing here, but in reverse, which is really an interesting phenomenon. You mentioned that, Europe, UK, their digital adoption looks the same as some of the other English-speaking places like Australia, or is it different? Or how do you see the European market compared to Australia?
Yes. Look, getting hard stats on digital adoption, and it depends what you mean by digital adoption, but all we can tell is that the conversations we have with industry partners and people like that. But certainly my perception is that the UK is much more digital first than Australia even, and certainly quite a lot more than the States. Again, consumer preference has driven it, but also the government's been really helpful in the UK from that perspective, and it's freed up a lot of those regulations. So they're well on the way to being a digital first environment, and you're seeing that in the numbers of print and mail sort of communications that are sent out all the time. So I think if I had to rate it, they'd be at the higher end of adoption. Australia and parts of this part of the world are pretty high, and probably the US follows up.
So what are we still, coming from the legacy CCM industry, we still tend to talk about these things in terms of channels, right? Yeah. Outputs. And so from on the digital equation, what are obviously email, but where do you see all of this going? Is it going to in-app messaging, or what do you think that looks like?
It's a very good question, Andy. Look, I think it depends on what time frame you're talking about. Over the next little while, I think you're just going to find faster and faster digital adoption. So in the UK, I think in the next, by the 2030s, I think the UK is just going to be pretty much digital. Right. I think in Australia, we're going to be close behind. There's a lot more freeing up the government needs to do. And look, I'm not suggesting that print and mail channels are going to cease to exist. They're just, right, in my opinion, they're just going to become quite secondary. They're one of the smaller channels, a little bit like email used to be back in the day, Andy, a little bit specialist. So that's what's happening. I think the US is going to continue to go down that path. I just think there's a cultural history in the US of getting things in the mail. It comes from years and years of the direct mail industry, the catalog industry. People are used to receiving stuff. And I think that's going to change with the regulation over time. But to answer your question more specifically, I think ultimately communication is going to be we've gone from doing big batches of things. You'd do 10,000 of something to a group, and that was the way you used to do it. Well, if you go back far enough, we used to send the same thing to everybody every time, basically.
Yeah.
And then it went to batches of things based on, demographics or personalities or those sorts of things. And we're getting closer and closer now, but I think ultimately it's just going to be very single com stuff, which is driven by, ultimately I think it's all going to be driven by AI, where, you want to communicate with a company, your communication journey will not be orchestrated in advance. It'll all happen instantly through automation. And that's probably several years down the track, but I think that's ultimately where it's heading, really. But in the meantime, I think more and more customers are going to invest in their own in-house software in the form of CCM.
Yeah, so that's one of the stories that I think I spend a lot of time talking about the transformation in print and mail. So I talk a lot about print service providers because they're the manufacturers of all this stuff, right?
Yes.
I think something if I had to guess just based on my own knowledge, I'd say 70-80% of the transactional mail volume in the United States is produced by a third party. It's not produced in-house. It's done, but shipped to a third party. So they play a really important role sort of in this communications layer.
Of course.
And you think then, okay, what the first question is that I have is, we progress down this path, and print goes from current volume to say 70%, drops 70%. We're going to go, there's still going to be remaining volume, but it's going to be a lot.
Absolutely. Right? Yes.
So you're going to have a few companies that are doing really well in print, and everybody else, they're going to find something else. And I think we're seeing that. But I guess the question is, these PSPs, are we thinking, number one, are they needed? Are they relevant anymore?
Yep.
As this trend. And if they are, what are they?
Look,
are they agencies now? Are they?
This is a big question.
Integrators? What are they?
This is a big question. Something I've had to deal with in various CEO roles in these businesses, so it's very relevant to me. I think, based on my experience, I think it's very hard to. I think, first of all, the print service providers are going to have to accept the reality that they really won't be composing things anymore. They'll just be receiving PDFs.
That's legacy CCM, right? As they call it. If your view of the world of CCM is composition, your legacy CCM. I mean, for sure.
Yeah. So all the composition will be done not by you. I think print service providers need to just understand that they'll have to get super, super efficient with their print and mail, and it'll be a little bit of a last man standing discussion, because ultimately there won't be lots and lots of them, but there'll be. Now, whether that's a few big ones left running everything, or whether it's some smaller ones as well, I really don't know. But
UK is a use case, right? You just go look at what happened in the UK, and you say,
exactly, a microcosm of what could happen in the States. I think the other thing is that most people in our space want to be a communications business, not a mail house, and so the problem is that means that you need a lot of skills and experience and approach and knowledge that probably doesn't traditionally sit with some of the traditional PSPs. And so my advice to a PSP these days is, if get really efficient with your print and mail, cut out all the unnecessary stuff. And if you want to be in the digital space, really thoroughly in the digital space, invest in somebody who knows. Growing it organically within a print environment is really hard work. And this is just me talking, but it's hard work.
Well, it's hard work because why? It's hard work because they don't know how to sell it. It's a different revenue model, right? You're selling to a different buyer in the enterprise. It's all these things that look completely unlike print manufacturing.
It's difficult. For all those reasons. Look, there's very smart people in the PSP space. Don't get me wrong. It's just that having done what I've done in my life, if I had that opportunity again, they're the two things I'd focus on, is super optimizing my print and mail so I can just take stuff in and pump it out without composing it. That's gone. And I would also consider, if I wanted, and a good example of this is what Broadridge has done recently with Signal. Investing in the expertise, because it's hard to build it internally, but even if you do manage to succeed, it takes a long time. I think if you're going to be a serious comms player across a digital environment, I think investment makes sense if you want to fast track it.
Yeah, time to market, I think we were talking about earlier today, it's critical, right? You don't have 3 to 5 years to hope you catch up.
By the
if
time
you're starting today, you're already behind. I mean,
it'll be done by the time you've thought about it. That's the problem.
Right. And there's some interesting things from vendors, those software companies coming around to address some of that sort of built for purpose stacks and things that are coming into the print service provider market. And I hope that they look at them in the same way they look at a new press, right? Say, hey, that thing over there can grow my business by 30 or 40%. Why should they look at any other opportunity any differently? And that's
Yes, yes. I wouldn't be necessarily. I'd be thinking really hard about when I was upgrading my press and my inserting machines at the moment, to be honest.
But would you agree with this sentiment, which is my philosophy or theory, and I have a lot of anecdotal evidence to suggest it's true, is those print service providers that have successfully navigated this transformation where, let's say, more than 50% of their revenues are now not print.
Yeah.
It's digital services. They're actually pulling the print volume with them, right? Because the customers are saying, hey, I'm not going to go shop this icky print stuff and then go look for a separate digital. I'm going to look for a place that can give me both. But they're not going to shop based on the print. They're going to be shopping based on digital capabilities and get rewarded with whatever print's left, they'll get it. And so there are examples of this around the world where we've seen PSPs make this transformation, and their print volume is either staying the same or in some cases actually growing. And it's not because the market's getting bigger. It's just that they're pulling more of the print volume.
Of course.
It's gravitating towards them.
Yeah, it's about market share. If you can, I mean, there's going to still be millions and billions of printed items in the US for many years, right? I mean, the point is it might be 70% less than it was 10 years ago, but that's still plenty for a number of smart providers. Don't get me wrong. It's not stopping overnight.
Yeah. So on this, in terms of cadence and working with clients, is there a particular vertical that you're seeing that's really kind of pushing the envelope, or are they all thinking along a little bit at the same, or are you seeing any sort of the vertical industry stand out in terms of where they're going and what they're focused on?
Yes, yeah, that's a good question. Look, I think in our part of the world, in Australia, we're seeing we're seeing quite strong digital adoption in the superannuation sector, which is our pension sort of area, which is quite big in this part of the world. And I think it's driven a lot by government regulation. There's a lot of rules around how you communicate and communicating in context and making sure people can understand what you're saying that apply to that industry. And so it helps push the industry along a bit to be really smart with what they do. So some are further along than others, but I think it's hard to say in general one's ahead of the other or behind the other. I think within an industry you'll find a bank that's got 85% digital adoption and they're doing that sort of volume, and then you'll find another bank in the same part of the industry that's got 40%. We're focused on helping those ones to improve their uptake and control stuff a lot more. There's also a big challenge with compliance, Andy, in here, and I don't know if it's true in the States. There's been some big fines lately by people doing the wrong thing, people putting marketing messages on essential communications and breaching privacy legislation and things. And it's just so much easier to control that if you've got the visibility that the CCM gives you.
Yeah.
So I think it's hard to generalize across an industry. I think within the verticals, there's some good, really strong players who are doing a great job of it, and there's others who aren't.
Yeah. And are you seeing, has the customer communications center of excellence, whatever you want to call it, is it moving? It used to be, I always think of like a legacy CCM in the basement owned by IT, right? Kind of, we got to do this stuff, so let's do it the cheapest way we can. And now it's elevated into a different conversation that's happening in the enterprise. And are you seeing different ownership or people driving some of these initiatives that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the rise of the chief customer officer and these sorts of roles, back in the day, when we were doing traditional print and mail, we would end up dealing with the procurement people or various people and occasionally someone in marketing. But there's a lot more focus on the customer experience and journey now. And certainly I'm seeing that everywhere in the world. And I think, there's specialist roles now that are focused on that. Because Cadence does a broad range of things, sometimes we're dealing with the CIO on the technology side, but we're dealing with chief growth officer or the chief revenue officer on the customer side, and there'll be people from marketing and customer experience. So it's quite broad. I think it's changed quite a bit over the years. Absolutely.
Yeah. We brought up customer experience, which we haven't touched on. And customer journey orchestration and all of that kind of stuff. I guess my question is, you had mentioned there's these other entities now taking a seat at the table when we start talking about some of these new projects, right? You mentioned marketing, brand, customer experience. Because we have AI, which is the beginning and the end of everything it seems we talk about these days. How is that sort of impacting now, where you've had sort of customer communications had its carved out thing? It was regulated, compliance, high integrity. And then you got the MarTech folks over here that are just doing whatever they want to do to get people's attention and to buy something. But now there's this recognition that, hey, how do we work together? And I think AI then is the thing that's going to say, demand data from both systems and start driving more this integration of what we've always thought of as customer communications with more sort of marketing functionality, where it's the old saying, 360 view of the customer, right? We want to have one single record of truth of Kim. Where's that all going? What does that look like?
Yeah, no, that's good question. So look, I think for years it's been moving together, because we used to have very clear delineation. Your statement and your invoice was over here and your marketing piece was over here. Now we're seeing, documents that there's a rate rise notification marketing or essential mail. That's been happening for a while. In Australia, what they are trying to do with the privacy legislation is prevent people from, selling things on the essential communications with some regulation, which changes the environment a little bit. But no, I think definitely coming together. I think that some of the technology is enabling it to come together more easily. But it's down to people's data. One of the things is some of our research, Andy, shows that, certainly in some of the financial institutions, that up to 70 or 80% of the communication a customer receives, and I'm talking about the end customer here now, is transactional. So that's your relationship. And if you're not aware that's your relationship and you're relying on the two marketing things you send them, then, it's not smart to not recognize that. And we're seeing a lot more clients in our part of the world, at least, understand that and make sure that we're not necessarily turning it into a marketing message, but we're making sure it's simple to read. It's in the right context. You've got accessibility issues and language issues and clear calls to action, things that you would think are pretty standard, but sometimes businesses just don't think of. So I think looking at an essential piece of comm as an important touch point for a client is really important, really important.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you what the future looks like from your perspective, but I wanted to ask that in the context of, there was recently a vendor in the CCM space that was acquired that received a pretty significant valuation that made a lot of people go, wow. The only rumor I heard is the number was actually much higher than what was put out there publicly. But, private equity drives a lot of this business, right? Private equity is a key driver behind the service providers, at least in North America and parts of Europe. It's private equity. And I think it's true in the vendor space as well. And so when you look at the future, say you're an investment banker advising somebody or a private equity firm, what's that future look like? What are we looking for? Where are the multiples going to come from?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I wish I had a really good answer to that, and
I
probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. I'd be a multi-millionaire by now.
But, no kidding. Put it all on red.
But no, it's a good question. I think that finally some of the digital stuff we're doing is starting to really change the landscape in customer communications. I feel like at some point CCM is going to evolve away from, it's still very much a batch-based thing, right? Streams and batches and these types and personalities. I think it's going to have to become a lot more reactive, interactive, instantaneous. And so I think the organization, and look, a lot of the organizations that, are well known in CCM are already investing in this space. I think the winners are going to be those who really succeed. And it will be driven a lot by AI. Ultimately, what's going to happen is that you connect with your bank, it instantly gives you everything you need without any pain or friction in whatever way you want. It doesn't have to think about it, talk to 29 million different places, and it's all pretty seamless and instantaneous. And I think whoever wins that battle is going to win the prize, the big prize. I think there's a few players who are trying hard in that space at the moment. The other thing to remember is that AI at the moment is it's a big hype thing, and it's absolutely going to be the changer of everything. But we're still seeing a lot of our customers asking to have a human in the loop.
The trust factor is not there yet when it comes.
Not quite. But you did ask about the future, so I
tend to agree with you. I'm a little more of a skeptic than I am I don't know. I just take a contrary view, whatever that is, but it seems. But on the AI question, I tend to agree with you that I think, depending on who you read and who you listen to, you get these two opposing sort of opinions about where we're headed. It's really fascinating.
I think ultimately, Andy, you're going to want the people who are going to win are the ones who make every touch point and experience a customer has with their institution, be it a bank or insurance company, seamless, instant, fun, enjoyable, meaningful. It's the people who can do that, they're going to win. And I don't know where they
and they're going to interact with our own personal agents that we've already told them what to do.
Everything.
Pay the bill, whatever.
Instantly. It just knows the bill has to be paid. You know what I mean?
Whole notion of conversations of sending stuff, it's almost, I was trying to describe it to my wife yesterday, and I said, so it's like a car company thinking about moving people, right? It's, we can put wheels on it, it can fly, there's all kinds of ways we can move people around.
Yes.
Yeah, what about Star Trek, man? They didn't use wheels. They had to whatever that thing was called. I'm like, that we're talking that kind of, we're not even talking about the same thing anymore. We're talking about a button and somebody zaps to the surface of another planet versus getting in some vehicle that's going to move you somewhere.
Absolutely. CCM is, up until now, has just been a better way to do what we've always done, which is organize and orchestrate communications. But what I'm saying is that's all going to be done. Like there won't be any need for any of that. It's all going to be known and done.
So if I was a software vendor in this space, particularly in the workflow space, I'd be terrified to hear you say that. I think the good news in all of this, though, do you know how many AS400s are still out there running? Come on. It's all over the place, right? And so there's still going to have to be this blob that comes out of the AS400 that we do something with, and then we give it back some blob at the end of the day. And all that stuff's still going to be happening.
Yeah. Right? No, for a while that will be the case. And I think, what did I read a quote the other day that said, people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in 10. So we don't really know, but I think the reality is that when, where it'll get to will be so seamless, instant, gratifying and comfortable that people won't even think about it anymore. Consumers won't even, it'll just be part of your life.
Yeah, no, I know it'll just be embedded into our fabric of our daily experience. So where can people meet you guys? I've seen you on LinkedIn. Looks like you're doing some different events. Are there some things that are coming up in Australia or your part of the world where you're going to be participating in the next, the last quarter or next spring?
Yeah, no, thanks for asking. Look, we have probably a good way to start is jump onto our website, which is cadence.com, cadencecommunications.com.au in Australia. Our LinkedIn page is there as well, and it shows quite a lot about what we're doing, etc. We are at in Australia, we're on the Gold Coast. Actually, we're at the Australian Superannuation Trade Show in November, which is nice, and then we're into next year where we're doing some more in the insurance space. We don't have any immediate plans to be in, for instance, the US or Europe. We're doing a little bit of work in Hong Kong and Japan at the moment. But yeah, reach out. All of our contact details are there, and we'd love to have a chat. We're a bit passionate about this stuff, Andy, as you can probably tell.
So that's great. I'm glad we met. And actually, it goes Scott. Thanks goes out to Scott Dreger for connecting us.
Thank you, Scott.
I did want to challenge you though with one question before I let you go.
Of course.
And this is actually for my friends in the United States, but we talk a lot about customer data, and there's this big conversation of what is the most important data point to have about a customer? Is it their physical mailing address, their email address, or their mobile device number?
I'm going to go mobile because I think email's got a limited life. I think physical, as I've already said to you on the call today, it's there, but it's not
very valuable. There's just going to be a lot less of it.
Yeah, it's going to be important. I think mobile. I don't even think we're going to use computers. Everything's going to be through mobile devices. I remember when they first came out, and a chap I know from the States was over visiting, and he said, Kim, you know what I think is going to happen? I think people are going to take photos of themselves in various locations and share them with their friends. And I said, oh, so that'll never work.
Yeah, you and Kodak both, right?
Yeah, that's right. So I don't know whether that means don't listen to me or not, but the reality, look, I think the reality is more and more things are going to be mobile. I think hardwired anything is going to be a thing of the past as things like Starlink and things continue to take off and data up and down becomes so cheap, it's almost everywhere that people are just not going to use. They're just going to go the way of a mobile phone, a landline phone, I think, to be honest with you.
Yeah, these things will come in and drop it in a cradle, and it'll be hooked up to a keyboard and a monitor, and it'll be your everything.
It's
Now
everything.
we have like a laptop and a mobile around, but someday it'll just be one.
I think so.
Cool. Is there anything that you wanted to cover, Kim, that we didn't discuss, or any other thing that's on your brain before we can always do another call another time.
Not really. I think we've had a really good chat. I'm sure I'll think of some things when we hang up, Andy. But no, I appreciate the opportunity to have a bit of a yak, and we'll see. It'll be interesting to see what the edited version looks like.
Yeah, we've been going for 50 minutes. I'm gonna stop recording. I did have one more question for you before I let you go. I'm gonna just stop.